We're on 2 Samuel chapter 8, and I'll remind you that chapter 7 actually happens after chapter 8 when you think about chronology, but the Bible uses a thing sometimes called telescoping or non-chronological narrative, which is they'll put more important things first. The Gospel of John, very famous for that as well, but the writer here, Samuel, really wanted us to see what was happening here. Or I guess this part of Samuel was written by the prophet Nathan. And they wanted us to see the promise, the dynasty that David was promised, that he would not build the temple. He's got too much blood on his hands. He didn't always listen to God in the way that he did. He said, look, you can't build the temple, but I promise you your son will. And David really loved this idea. This was not discouraging for him in the sense like, whoa, my own son, my own flesh and blood is going to be honoring God by building a temple. And so David gets that honor. He himself doesn't get to do it. And I talked to you about how David asks the question, once everything is settled, what can I do for God? And it sort of parallels that golden understanding for our lives, which is love God, love others. He says, what can I do for God? In 2 Samuel chapter 9, he's going to ask the question, what can I do for others? Right here now, we have that reprieve, that defeat that needs to happen in order to achieve what we see in 7. He still has some enemies. And I want to tell you what can happen when we forget to live in the promises of God. And I want to use an illustration. It's a really famous one. It all started on November 27th in 1095 AD. If you don't know that date, it's the date that Pope Urban II said, you know what? I think we need to do a crusade into the Holy Land. And he did this because the king or leader of Constantinople, the Eastern Empire of Rome, sent a letter. His name was Alexius I. He sent a letter to Pope Urban. He said, hey, so the Turks or the Muslims, they called them Saracens at the time, they're invading my areas and I need some help. Can you send some people? Now he was thinking he's going to send me anywhere from 400 to 600 trained knights, and that's going to help. Pope Urban II says this is a golden opportunity. He delivers a fiery sermon and he makes an incredible promise. He says, if you fight in this holy war and you do it for God, all of your sins are forgiven and you go straight to heaven. Now, for a Catholic, that's like, whoa, avoid purgatory? That's really awesome. So here Alexius I is expecting 400 to 600 trained knights, and 60,000 European men and some women are marching into the Holy Lands. And they show up outside the gates of Constantinople. They're like, we're here to help. And he's like, what? He keeps the gates closed. I can't feed all these people. So 3 of the commanders come up and he's like, look, if you pledge allegiance to me, I'll let you, because you're a big enough army, you could take me out if you wanted to. So they pledge allegiance to Alexius I, like, hey, we're not going to do anything bad. And they want to go claim the prize, which is Jerusalem. They have in some incredible battles. They're really feeling invincible. And then they get to Antioch. Antioch is a church. It really was established by Peter. It was one of the first churches ever built, and it was established by Peter. It's also the first place we were ever called Christians, which is little Christs. So they're surrounded there, or they're surrounding Antioch, and they can't get in, and the Muslims inside send a pigeon out, and the pigeon sends word, hey, we need help. When the Crusaders find out, they're like, we need to get in. They pay a guy on the inside, and he's like, hey, we're going to stand down at our watchtowers. They put ladders in, they sneak in, they open the gates, they take over Antioch. Now they're on the inside, but they're weak. And they had been drinking horse blood and eating shoe leather because they were starving. And now they're on the inside. There's not a lot of supplies in there. And now they're surrounded. They had eaten so many of their horses, they only had 200 left. and they're surrounded by Muslims, 75,000, and there's 20,000 on the inside. And they're well equipped on the outside. They could fight what's called a war of attrition. They could just wait till you die in there. Then a priest came out and he said, hey, his name was Peter Bartholomew. He said, you know what? I just had a vision. I think I'm going to find the Holy Lance, or the spear of Longinus, the spear of destiny. That's the spear that pierced the side of Jesus when he's on the cross. We got to go dig a hole in the church of Peter. So he goes with 12 disciples. They close the door. They start digging. They're not finding anything. The day's waning. And Peter himself jumps in and he finds it. He says, I found it. Now, there's 3 of these, by the way, if you're wondering. 3 different spears, all claim to be it. None are officially officialized by the Catholic Church. So whether this is true or not, I'll tell you what it did do. It inspired everybody. And with just 200 horses, 12,000 men against 75,000, they walked outside those gates. And it's reported, many of them reported that they saw these white, almost celestial beings with them as they totally just won with a battle of greater than 1 against 2, with fewer horses. When they're starving to death, they fought with such desperation and they conquered. It's like, whoa, it's cool. And so here they are feeling like God is really with them. They got this spear of destiny, which Peter Bartholomew believed so strongly in that he actually did a trial of ordeals where he walked through fire with it. And there's 2 reports. Either the fire killed him because he was so severely burned, or he was perfectly fine, so much so that it caused the crowd to go into a frenzy that they hugged him to death, and his bones. Either way, he dies at the end. But I say this idea because think about this. They really believe that God just delivered them from being wildly outnumbered. A few months later, they're hungry and they're mad that they're not moving towards Jerusalem fast enough. They go to a small town, and because that small town doesn't have a lot, they take the children, the babies, and they put them on spits, and they roast them, and they put the adults into cauldrons and boil them alive and eat them. What? How do you go from really, really believing that God is with you to doing something so disgusting and evil? When you forget the promises of God, you'll forget whose power is really saving you. And then you'll realize that all you have is problems. You just have problems all around you. That's all you'll ever see are problems, because you're forgetting whose power it really is. When Ashley and I, we were watching something with our son. He's read the books. We've read the books, the Chronicles of Narnia. There's the Prince Caspian one, and the little girl Lucy looks at Peter because Peter is like, hey, we've waited long enough on Aslan, who's like the Christ character, right? We've waited long enough. We got to go do something. And she looks at him and says, I feel like you've forgotten who really won the battle before. It was never you. And when you think it's only you, you'll think only you have the solutions. And you'll get into all kinds of issues. So here we have in chapter 7 the promise. And what David at least is good at most of the time is remembering who is granting him victory. We're going to see some justice in this chapter, and so I want to read it through. There's some brutality. This is war, and I want to make some points out of it. But my theme that I'm going to be running with is God knows, and I'm going to show you why it's important for us to remember that God knows. But let me go ahead and read this. I don't have the light up here, so I have to strain my old eyes. All right. Later, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. David took Metheg-Ammah from the Philistines, which is Gath. It's just another name for Gath, which is the capital. He defeated the Moabites. He made them lie on the ground and then used a rope to measure them off. He put 2/3 of them to death and spared the other third. The Moabites became David's subjects and brought tribute. David defeated King Hadadezer, son of Rahab, of Zobah. When he came to reestablish his authority over the Euphrates River, David seized from him 1,700 charioteers and 20,000 infantrymen. David cut the hamstrings of all but 100 of the chariot horses. The Arameans of Damascus came to help King Hadadezer of Zobah, but David killed 22,000 of the Arameans. Some translations will just say the Syrians. David placed garrisons in the territory of the Arameans of Damascus. The Arameans became David's subjects and brought tribute. The Lord protected David wherever he campaigned. David took the golden shields that belonged to Hadadezer's servants and brought them to Jerusalem from Taba and Berothai, Hadadezer's cities. King David took a great deal of bronze. When King Toi of Hamath heard that David had defeated the entire army of Hadadezer, he sent his son Joram to King David to extend his best wishes and to pronounce a blessing on him for his victory over Hadadezer. For Toi had been at war with Hadadezer. He brought with him various items made of silver, gold, and bronze. King David dedicated these things to the Lord, along with the dedicated silver and gold that he had taken from the nations that he had subdued, including Edom, Moab, the Ammonites, the Philistines, and Amalek. This also included some of the plunder taken from King Hadadezer, son of Rehob of Zobah. David became famous when he returned from defeating the Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He defeated 18,000 in all. He placed garrisons throughout Edom, and all the Edomites became David's subjects. The Lord protected David wherever he campaigned. David reigned over all Israel. He guaranteed justice for all his people. So you saw a lot of brutality there. Here's what's really interesting. I want to read for you Genesis 18:15 through 21. It says this: That day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, who later became Abraham. To your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Kadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Raphates, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and the Jebusites. This land was promised to Abraham, and that promise wasn't fulfilled really to this moment, where David is taking that land. And so when you think about God's promises, you got to remember it's his time, not ours. It would be easy for Abraham to be like, okay, when? Honestly, not even close to your lifetime, bud. It's not going to happen maybe when you want it, but you have started something. And when we think about how God can use us, sometimes we are finishing things. We are participating in things that have already started. Sometimes we're starting things. The reality is God's promises will be fulfilled. But we have to be patient with God's timing, not ours. I want to go and walk you through some of these things because they can seem kind of brutal. So first, in 1 Samuel chapter 22, 3 through 4, David entrusted his parents to the Moabites. Now, we never hear about his parents again. Now, most people have suggested that the Moabites probably mistreated David's parents, maybe even killed them. And this led David to be very strict with his justice against that nation, the Moabites. And so he did spare some of them, but he was brutal in his judgment and how he measured them out and put them to death. And this idea, this justice that we see, we're going to see a theme where forgiveness can never really operate at the expense of ignoring justice. That's just not how it works. In fact, if you ignore justice, then you've perverted forgiveness. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is just decides who's paying the cost. And is it you or is it them? And so ultimately, when we think about how God forgives us, the justice was fully met by him and upon him. So it was not justice ignored, it was justice satisfied. And so in this particular case, God is using David to satisfy justice. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about these nations as we get farther in. And some of you will recognize it. At first, you might be like, oh, this sounds really bad. And honestly, sometimes when you hear kind of the things that were happening, you'll be like, okay, that makes sense. And I don't want to be affirming for you a really weak understanding of Christianity where we just sort of let evil be, where we tolerate what is wrong, what is evil, and especially what affects our children. We need to be people who are strong in the truth. And that just doesn't mean strong in our words, but strong in the way we act against things that are so against what God has for us. We're gonna see that. But I want to give an illustration when I think about promises, because my wife and I married 16 years ago. I knew that. This morning I said 17. I had it wrong. I know we were born. Well, we were married on May 10th, and I got that part right, but I had the year wrong. So my wife keeps track of those. 2008. Yeah, she says yes. She told me that this morning. But we've been married a long time. And when I saw her come down that aisle and I was pretending to be water-eyed so that I could, because people were going to be looking at me, it was a really tender, awesome moment, of course, but I had to feel feign emotion that frankly, it was awesome. This sounds bad, but I wasn't at the time, and I am really now. I wasn't really a crier. So it was kind of people are going to look at you. So I'm like, okay, pinching my side, trying to get my eyes to water. And she's coming down, and I'm looking at her. She's so beautiful. Sometimes I just remember, days are hard, but the most beautiful woman in the world is married to me. So that you can't be too bad with life. And I saw her, and we made these vows. And those were so easy to make. In that moment, richer and poorer, sickness, health, that's easy. Why? Because none of that is true right now. Right? That promise is so easy to make because none of those things for me in that moment as I'm looking at her are true. We're not dealing with any of that. I'm not man, I really don't like her right now. Why would you get married to somebody you're like, we got a lot of problems. The whole thing's falling apart, but I'm making these vows. I'm making those vows for later. I'm making those vows for when those things might be true. And we have to recognize it's so easy, maybe in easy moments, to be like, oh, yeah, God's promise is this. Man, but the affirmation of those vows or those promises that we get in God are tested throughout our life. Do we really believe it? I mean, you think about those crusaders, oh, yeah, you really believed that Christ was with you? You really thought that horses of angels were with you? Well, where was he when you were eating children? Where were you believing in that promise when that was happening? Because that's when those vows and those promises matter. When you are desperate. When you are feeling like everything around you is crumbling and you have no solutions, that's when it matters. You relinquish yourself and you give it to a God who has your best interests in mind, to a God who can take care of you when you frankly cannot. That's when it matters. You know what? When my wife opens the cupboard above my head and I'm emptying the dishes and I smash my head into that, that's when my vows matter, right? That's when it matters, right? When I'm getting up in the morning and she's been up 2 hours before me and she's still not ready to leave, that's when it matters, right? And it's hard. It's hard sometimes to be mad at her when she's like, I'm a train wreck. And you just want to be like, yeah, right? But you're my train wreck, you know? I love you, right? I want to support you. I want to help you. But sometimes it can be a lot. It can be hard, right? But by the way, I'm the same way, right? I know that I say things sometimes and she's like, I wish I could put those back in your mouth, you know? I wish you never said that. You're gonna remember that, right? Oh, by the way, I didn't make a formal apology. I did say how Chris believed things like that my mom beats me with jumper cables or whatever. Like, it was Jerry. I had the wrong person. Wrong person. Yeah. So if we could get somebody else under the bus rather than him. He came to me, he's like, why'd you say that? That's not true. So I don't always remember conversations. To revisit that for a moment. But promises are challenged, and we all do it. Sometimes we make promises in the light, but they're always challenged in the dark. We say, man, I'm going to do this. I'm going to live this way. I'm going to get this right. But when it's late at night, nobody's looking. Or when it actually matters. All of you have that sort of experience. Maybe when you're like, I'm going to get up early and run in the morning. Yeah, and then morning comes, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and snooze that one. Because it's hard. We need to be people who are learning to embrace the promises of God when it is most difficult. That is when it matters. I mean, Jesus says, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. That's easy. Can you love those who hate you? And I want to talk about that because God knows when to fulfill promises. We don't. He knows when the time is right, and we don't. And if we get stuck on our own timing, we're going to think ourselves more knowledgeable than God, and He knows when to fulfill it. And sometimes I'm like, God, rapture, come on, right? His timing, not mine. God is patient. I'm not very patient. Let me give you a few, just that idea of how we don't always get to see the end from the beginning. Here in 1 Corinthians 3, 6 through 8, this is Paul talking. He says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God caused it to grow. So neither the one who plants counts for anything, nor the one who waters, but God who causes the growth. John 4, 37 through 78 says this, for in this instance, the saying is true. One sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap what you did not work for. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. You think about all the prophets that came before who got to proclaim Jesus' coming, right? And now they never really got to see that come to fruition. Oh, but man, we did. We're living on the other end of a really awesome promise. What we'll see here, when I think about loving when it is difficult, God knows when to disable and when to destroy. And this is an important point because especially as we get into like really heated political season, as we get into those times where we can see people at each other's throats. I'm not on Facebook. I kind of live vicariously through my wife when she says like, yeah, this is happening. I'm like, oh, that's too bad, right? I don't want to see it. It's too overwhelming to me. And I want to work really hard on how to love people. So mitigating the amount of stuff I see other people say really helps me do that. Because there are things that are just really. But there's a section here where David is, sorry, my thing went off, where David is cutting the hamstrings of these horses. Almost all of them, except for the ones that he takes. And I've read some commentaries where people have said, it seems like it would have been better, okay? to just kill the horses than hamstring them. And I hate that idea. This was David's way of saying, I'm going to make it so you can't use them, but I don't want to kill the horses. Like, the horses can live a perfectly fine life without being able to run at full speed. And so by disabling them, he's prevented them from being used in the power of armies, but kept them alive. I think that was a really nice thing for David to do. And there are times when I am doing apologetics and I'm arguing with somebody, I have to recognize at the end of the day, I want that person to be a Christian. So I want to disable their arguments and not destroy the person. Because, man, I can definitely make them feel terrible. But what happens when you really attack the person and rather than try to remove the foundation of their argument, when you really are latching into them, they want to become maybe even more entrenched. Because when you hurt them, they want to hurt you back. And so if you can destroy the argument versus the person, what you have left is just the person. And that's who I want to love. That's who I want to see come to Jesus. And there is a theme in the Bible about the idea of disabling and destroying. God knows when to destroy. God knows when to destroy things. Paul talks about what we should be trying to destroy, and it's not people. This is what he says. This is not working out for me, huh? Paul says this. Where is it? He says it somewhere, I promise. Here it is. 2 Corinthians 10, 4 through 5. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments in every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. Paul's talking about destroying the arguments that set themselves up against God, because when we take away those false beliefs, we have just the people left that are believing them. And that's who we want to see saved. But when we destroy people, we actually lose our purchase in their lives to speak truth to them. It says this in Ephesians 6, 10 through 12. Finally, be strengthened in the Lord and in the strength of his power. Clothe yourselves with the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world rulers of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavens. Sin, it's the claws of Satan and his schemes. It's the way he turns and manipulates us, the way he gets us to believe in things that draw us farther away from God. The devil has schemes. And at the end of the day, it's those schemes I want to disrupt, because by disrupting those schemes, it's the people we have left. I want to disable that. Right? I want to teach especially young people to be able to speak truth in love. It can be easy to speak truth in meanness. I want to sometimes. I want to speak truth in a way that makes you feel so badly and stupid. But it's truth in love that dismantles arguments without destroying people. I'm gonna tell you some sinister things here when you think about these people. So there are some gods of these nations. You have a god named Moloch. You have a god named Chemesh. You have a god named Dagon. And you have a god named Baal, sometimes Baal Haman. These are the gods of these nations. Now, I'll submit to you that these lowercase g gods still operate today. Not in the sense of like these are actual like, hey, the Zeus Apollo kind of thing. No, I'm talking about the schemes of the devil and that darkness that it talks about. It's this right here. It's we are dealing with old demons but new schemes. So in 2 Kings 3:27, the Moabite king sacrifices his son Misha to the god Chemesh. And it's easy to look and be like, oh, that's really bad. So it's only at that time, the Jewish nation and the law had an established law against sacrificing your children. The other nations did not. So we see in these nations that they would have a basin. So, for instance, we have Moloch who had his arms open like this and had these bull horns, probably a bull head, and in his belly was a big furnace. That's the most common depiction. So he would be like this, open and inviting for you to put your children inside. And so nations would go and they would put their children in these furnaces in order to burn them. And we actually have these things that we find all throughout archaeology. We find Tophets, which often have urns of ashes of children that they would sacrifice. And we have a whole area where we just call it Gehenna. And it's interesting because there's all of these Tophets in this area called Gehenna. And when Jesus uses the word hell, and he says that there's this place called hell, he wants to use the strongest language he can, so he calls it Gehenna. So when we translate hell in our Bibles, Jesus uses the place where children were sacrificed as the worst description for hell. It is Gehenna. And so all of these nations, whether to Chemesh or certainly Moloch, they were sacrificing their children. But we have these interesting accounts. You have it in the Jewish Talmud, so in the Jerusalem text. So it's called, in this case, it's the Sanhedrin. And in chapter 4, you're going to see that when they were sacrificing their kids to Moloch, the people would beat drums or play instruments in order to drown out the cries of the parents and of the children. Because if you were to hear these babies screaming, these children screaming, you might be reminded of their humanity. You might be reminded of how terrible that is. But also the fact that the parents really, some of them really believed that this was the only way to get water. It was the only way. And so they reluctantly gave their children up, and they would have the drums beat so just the voices would not be heard. Plutarch also mentions this, but he said that they would play flutes and other instruments to drown out the cries. And you think, man, that just the fact that these nations were wholesale killing their own children is so disgusting. And I can very much see in the world we live in today that those same demons of old have new schemes. From 1970 to right now, worldwide, 4 billion children have been aborted. There are 8.2 billion people in the world right now. 4 billion. Now, just to put it out there, when you think about medical reasons, I do want you to know that any medical reasons for abortion are so small, the ones that we know, don't even register statistically. Don't even, so it's so weird to use the aberrations out there and say, well, there's this reason, there's that. Yeah, okay. But that doesn't even register statistically, okay? We have so many people, and when I think about the beating of the drums and the cries and the parents who are actually reluctantly doing it, I think Moloch has gotten craftier and better at it. Think about this. I put some things together. So right now, statistically, 1 out of every 5 child is aborted. 73 million a year. That's 200,000 a day, which means 3.5, to 3.5 to 4 billion over the last 50 years. So if a book was 250 pages long on average, and each page had a child, that's 4 billion pages, there would be around 16 million books. For me, this is so staggering. And yet, this remains an issue we still discuss today. My heart breaks. And this is all in my family, from all parts of my family. I know this is a real issue with real people. And what I really want is just to destroy that argument. Because what we're left with is people. Maybe hurting people, maybe people who have participated. Yeah, I had that in my own family. Thank goodness, for instance, there was rape in my family. And had they not brought my grandma life, I wouldn't even be here. And these nations at the time are sacrificing their own children in furnaces, but we cannot look back and say, good thing that's not happening anymore. We cannot do that, because it is in a ruthless precision today. It is medical, cold, and precise. If you were to look at, sorry to be so graphic, but if you were to look at how it's done today, you can look at what's called a D&E. This would happen in the second trimester. They would use suction in the first trimester, a traditional second trimester D&E abortion. It's a dilation and extraction. You have to go in, you get some forceps, and you have to find the head. It's usually not ultrasound assisted. So you just go in and you'd find it. If it's about 2 fingers, right, about this in size, then you know you have the head. And you got to push down, and if you see white stuff come out, that's how you know you got the head, because it's the brain. And then you have to go in with forceps and pull out pieces. And then you reassemble it, because the child, you can see, has legs, arms, chest, organs, head, all. You have to reassemble it on this to know that you got every piece so that the woman doesn't hemorrhage. And to me, I'm sorry, that is ugly, right? And I don't ever want to be a pastor who shies away from things like that because it's too political. These are babies. And we need to recognize that we live in a world that is still sacrificing to Moloch. We've just gotten better at it. Parents aren't crying anymore. We can't hear the screams. We don't need drums or flutes to drown it out. We have gotten to them earlier. So when I look at the judgment here in this chapter, knowing what they're doing, I say, thank you, God. Thank you. God satisfies justice. He knows when to destroy. See, but our effort should be to dismantle those arguments that people are beholden to. People are believing things that are hurting them. People are believing things that aren't true. People are believing things that at the end of the day lead to the destruction of others. And we should want to dismantle those arguments so that we can better love those people. We want those people to be saved. And I'll tell you, a living example is we run the ministry. It's called Christian Influence. It's online. We had a young girl who was into to all of the things that you see out there on social media that make you go like, ugh. Even to the point that this person is a self-described Satan worshiper. It makes you want to just say, okay, just go away. This isn't the place for you. That person right now, this day, because we disabled rather than destroyed, because we loved despite rather than because we spoke the truth in love, that person right now goes to a Baptist church in a different state, asked us what kind of Bible she could get, and man, she's fallen in love with Jesus. We worship a God that transforms people. Nobody is too gone. Nobody is too lost. Nobody is too broken that cannot receive the restoration of Jesus. And I want that for people. And I hate that sometimes their arguments push me away when they should draw me to them to say, no, 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 no. That's not good for you. Some things, because they seem so ugly to me that they just get me to shut off when they should get me to, oh, this is gospel mode. I got to be in gospel mode, ready to love this person, because that's when the promise matters. When it is most difficult, that's when it shines. That's when those vows need to fight. I want to fight for people. God so loved the world. God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will be saved. That's what I want for them. When people were at their ugliest, God so loved the world. Man, we need to do that. So God knows when to disable and to destroy. God also knows when justice is satisfied. So God reconciles, and I want you to hear this, he reconciles us by satisfying justice, not by ignoring it. So there's a pretty famous thing that came out recently, because on September 6th of 2018, a cop was getting home. She was on the phone with somebody, and when she went into her apartment building, this was Adam Geiger, she opened her door and she saw a man eating ice cream in her home, and she got really scared and she shot him twice in the chest. And she realized that she didn't go 4 flights up, she only went 3. And it all looks the same, and it was not her apartment, it was her neighbor's apartment. So she was off duty at the time, she was a cop, and she shot this guy twice in the chest. So she was there in the courtroom, murder charges against her. She reported, like, I was afraid. He was unarmed, he was eating ice cream. He didn't have anything, but she shot him, and she deserves, frankly, to be punished for that. And there she was, broken, very sad. And the Botham, by the way, Gene is the one who did it, because I want to talk about his brother, Brant Gene, because he was there being examined. And he's sitting there and he says, I want you to know that I don't want anything bad to come to you. In fact, I don't even want you to go to jail. I want you to know that if you turn to God and repent, he will forgive you like I forgive you right now. And then he asked the judge, he said, can I hug her? And there they go in the middle of the courtroom, and they hug each other, even to the point where the judge needs to come down and says, can I get in on this? Like, that right there, though, is Brant saying, you know what? All that hurt of losing my brother, all that hardship, all that hurt, I'm going to take it on me rather than put it on you. When we forgive people, sometimes when we're the victims and we've been hurt and we forgive, we're just saying, I'm not going to put that on you. I'm going to take it on me. Forgiveness just determines who pays for it. It doesn't mean that justice isn't satisfied. It means it's where it is satisfied. So when God says, I forgive you, he's saying, I will satisfy the justice. That's what's so powerful about the cross. It's seen us in all of our sin, in all of our ugliness. The more I look at people, the more I know my own heart, the more I see how everybody gets it wrong. The Bible's very good at showing you everybody messes up. Everybody gets it wrong. We'll never have a perfect leader. We'll only ever have a perfect God. And Jesus takes the justice and satisfies it. So that forgiveness then is purchased by the precious blood of Jesus. And I hope you see that. Listen, it says this in Psalm 89:14. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne, talking about God. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before you. Colossians 2:13-14 says this. This is Paul. And even though you were dead in your transgressions and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, he nevertheless made you alive with him, having forgiven all of your transgressions. He has destroyed what was against us, a certificate of indebtedness expressed in decrees opposed to us. He has taken it away by nailing it to the cross. Justice satisfied, not ignored. Romans 5:9. Much more then, because we have now been declared righteous by his blood, we will be saved through him from God's wrath. When we ignore the promises of God, and we don't remember that God knows when they will be fulfilled, when we recognize that God knows when to destroy, and we should be focused on really disabling those bad arguments and loving people as God calls us to, and we recognize that at the end of the day, forgiveness is not justice ignored, it's justice satisfied. When we remember these things, then we can frankly live in the way that we ought to, recognizing that, yeah, we're going to have problems. Jesus predicted that. You're going to have problems. Victory is assured, just not yet. And we can live in that promise, live in that hope, knowing that what can stand against us when he is for us? David was good at that. There was a guy who had a really, really good idea. He decided that he was going to go and get a custom license plate that said null. Null. His idea was this. If he ever gets a ticket and it goes to the DMV, it would show up as null and they would think, oh, it's already voided or it's not, And so they would just toss it out. It's like, that's foolproof. The problem was every single ticket that wasn't adequately filled out and had null went to him. And so rather than avoiding tickets, all of a sudden he's fighting in court $20,000 worth of fines because everybody else's ticket went to him. So the justice he tried to avoid, all of a sudden now he's having to fight. He's like, whoa, I'm not all of these different people. Look, nobody can pay your fine. Nobody's that rich. Only God can pay your fine. And he did for us. So if we are forgiven such a great debt, we're going to have to remember that promise when it matters and working really hard to forgive the debts of others. Every single person is living with debt. Every single person is living with sin. Every single person has ugliness in them that you need to love despite, not because. We need to dismantle those arguments so that we can embrace those people with God's loving kindness, loving truth, because we want to save their souls. So that's what I think of when I come to this election cycle, when I come to this moment. I recognize that we are dealing with the same demons, just new schemes. And the best thing we can do with those is not let them get to the point where we want to destroy people. Let's destroy the schemes, as Paul says. Let's destroy those pretentious arguments that the devil is making so that we can love those people who are believing them. I hope that makes sense. Lord Jesus, I thank you so much that you have called us to be your ambassadors to a world that needs your love. God, help us to not be people full of hate. Help us to be people who are overwhelmed by your love, who recognize how much you have forgiven us so that we can forgive others. Help us be people who live out that love, God, who speak truth in love, who dismantle bad arguments so that we don't destroy people. God, we want to reach out to people who need your love. Never, ever treat people as too lost, God. You are a way maker, a chain breaker. You transform people by your loving mercy and grace. And we just want more people to see that, embrace it, and fall before your throne, God. We thank you that you are a God who is in control, who knows the end from the beginning, God, that your promises come true. Help us to remember that when it is hard. Help us to remember your promises in the dark when it is most difficult. Lord, be our light. Be our salvation. Lord, all we want to do is walk in your light. We thank you again that we can be your church, that we can gather in your name. I pray that in all things and in all ways, in this moment and forever, you are glorified. And we love you in your name. Amen.